A seismic shift has just rocked the global clean energy race, one that could reshape the future of electric vehicles, energy security, and international alliances for years to come. In a stunning move, Ontario is cutting off the U.S. from its vast reserves of battery materials, resources that are absolutely essential for powering the next generation of electric vehicles and renewable energy storage. For decades, American automakers have depended on Canada for a steady supply of lithium, nickel, and cobalt, the backbone of EV batteries. These minerals have quietly fueled the rapid growth of the U.S. electric vehicle industry, helping Detroit and Silicon Valley compete on the world stage. But now, that trust is shattered. The once rock-solid partnership between the two neighbors has been thrown into chaos, leaving American companies scrambling for alternatives. Ontario's government has announced it will prioritize these critical minerals for Europe, not the U.S., a dramatic pivot that signals a new era in global resource politics. Europe, sensing opportunity, moved with lightning speed. In a matter of weeks, European leaders secured a $20 billion deal, rerouting vital battery supplies away from North America and straight into European factories. This is more than just a trade spat, it's a geopolitical bombshell that upends the U.S. strategy to dominate the global EV market. The fallout is being felt in boardrooms, government offices, and on factory floors across the continent. The U.S. now faces a redrawn economic map, with old alliances tested and new ones forged. Trade routes are shifting, and the balance of power in the clean energy sector is suddenly up for grabs. The big question on everyone's mind: how did America, Canada's closest ally and trading partner, end up on the outside looking in? What went wrong behind closed doors, and can the rift ever be repaired? The fallout is immediate and far-reaching. Manufacturing jobs are at risk, EV prices could soar, and the future of the North American green economy hangs in the balance. Workers, consumers, and investors are all bracing for impact. Ontario's move has ignited fierce political debate on both sides of the border, exposing America's vulnerabilities in the clean energy race, and sparking urgent calls for new strategies and alliances. The era of predictable supply chains is over. Every nation is now fighting to secure its own future, in a world where resources are power and alliances can shift overnight. The global competition for battery resources has just gone into overdrive, and the world is watching to see who will come out on top in this high-stakes race for the future. Ontario's pivot didn't happen in isolation. This was a calculated move shaped by years of shifting political winds and economic uncertainty. It's a direct response to escalating U.S. protectionism, which had been building for some time and finally reached a breaking point. The Trump administration's steep tariffs on Canadian autos, steel, and aluminum hit Ontario hard, plunging exports and threatening jobs. Factories that once thrived on cross-border trade suddenly faced uncertainty, and the ripple effects were felt in communities across the province. For Ontario, the message was clear: the U.S. was no longer a reliable partner. The unpredictability of American policy meant that businesses couldn't plan for the future with confidence. Relying on a neighbor willing to impose damaging penalties became a strategic risk. Executives and policymakers realized that putting all their eggs in one basket could jeopardize the province's economic future. Ontario's leaders sought stability, turning to Europe, which offered partnership and lucrative deals. The European Union, with its vast market and commitment to open trade, became an attractive alternative. The EU's Green Deal and concrete investment offers made Europe the obvious alternative. Ontario saw opportunities in clean technology, innovation, and sustainable growth that aligned with its own ambitions. Ontario's decision was about economic self-preservation, diversifying away from an unpredictable U.S. market. By expanding its global reach, Ontario could protect jobs, attract new investment, and ensure long-term prosperity. The risks of prioritizing the U.S. were simply too high for long-term investment. The province had to adapt or risk falling behind in a rapidly changing world. By choosing Europe, Ontario found a stable partner and left the U.S. to face the consequences. This bold move signaled a new era in Ontario's economic strategy. The old North American trade order has been upended by a quest for security and growth. Ontario's pivot is a lesson in resilience and the importance of forging new alliances in an uncertain world. While the U.S. waged a trade war, Europe played a smarter game: diplomacy and investment. As U.S.-Canada ties frayed, Europe swooped in with a $20 billion package direct investment, subsidies, and long-term purchase guarantees for Ontario's battery minerals. The EU streamlined regulations and fast-tracked approvals, making their offer irresistible. This deal is a cornerstone of Europe's Green Deal, aiming for climate neutrality and supply chain sovereignty. By locking in Ontario's resources, Europe leapfrogs the US in the EV race. European automakers now have a secure, ethical supply of critical minerals, while US rivals scramble. The result? A strategic victory for Europe, reshaping the global clean energy landscape. The EU's proactive approach has fundamentally altered the dynamics of the battery supply chain. Ontario's pivot to Europe triggered a political firestorm in the US, led by former President Trump. He blasted the move as a betrayal and blamed weak trade policies, vowing harsh retaliation if re-elected. Trump's rhetoric turned the battery cutoff into a campaign weapon, fueling anger in industrial states. He threatened more tariffs and a full review of US-Canada trade, escalating tensions. The issue now dominates the national debate, putting pressure on the White House to respond. Ontario's decision has become a symbol of America's slipping influence and a flashpoint in the presidential race. The fallout is reshaping both trade policy and the political landscape. For Ford, GM, and Stellantis, Ontario's decision is a nightmare. Billions invested in EV production now hang in the balance as supply chains unravel. The sudden loss of Canadian lithium, nickel and cobalt creates a scramble for alternatives in a tight global market. New mines take years to develop, so US automakers face costly delays and lost market share to Europe and Asia. Battery costs will spike, pushing up EV prices and threatening production plans. Some automakers warn they may slow or pause EV rollouts, jeopardizing jobs and investments. The entire US automotive ecosystem, from suppliers to gigafactories, is bracing for impact. Carefully laid plans for an electric future are now in disarray. US automakers, already under global pressure, now face a critical disadvantage. The essential ingredients for their products are suddenly scarce and expensive. Key pain from Ontario's move will hit American consumers and workers directly. EV prices are set to rise as automakers pass on higher battery material costs. This could slow the shift to clean vehicles, making them less accessible for families. The crisis also threatens thousands of jobs at new US battery plants, which depend on steady mineral supplies. Production slowdowns or pauses are now a real risk, putting investments and livelihoods in jeopardy. Ironically, tariffs meant to protect US industry have backfired, pushing Canada to Europe and harming American competitiveness. The dream of a revitalized green manufacturing sector faces a major setback. America's vulnerability in the global resource race is now exposed. Without a stable supply strategy, the US risks falling behind in the clean energy transition. Europe and the US have taken radically different paths in the battery race. The EU's proactive strategy, investment, partnership, and the Green Deal secured Ontario's minerals and strengthened its industrial base. Europe's methodical approach de-risked supply chains and built global alliances. In contrast, America's reactive, tariff-heavy tactics alienated allies and created instability. Instead of building bridges, US policy burned them, leaving automakers exposed. Now the US is scrambling to negotiate and boost domestic mining, but from a position of weakness. Europe's success is no accident, it's the result of long-term planning and collaboration. The lesson: leadership in the new economy requires resilient, cooperative supply chains. Europe has set the standard, while America faces the cost of going it alone. The global clean energy race rewards strategy, not just size. The Ontario standoff signals a new era. Critical minerals are the new oil, and the global race for them is fierce. Countries like Canada now wield real power, choosing partners and dictating terms. The old era of stable alliances is fading as demand for battery minerals explodes. China, the US, and Europe are all vying for control of the green economy's foundation. Europe's Ontario deal is a move to break China's dominance and secure its own future. The US is playing catch-up, forced to rethink alliances and supply strategies. Resource-rich nations will be courted, resource-poor ones risk being left behind. In this new reality, resource security is at the heart of national interest. The North American EV industry now faces a crossroads. The choices made in the coming months will determine not just the fate of automakers, but the direction of an entire continent's approach to clean transportation. The stakes have never been higher, and the pressure is mounting from all sides. The Biden administration must urgently repair ties with Canada, or risk ceding the future to Europe. Years of cooperation are now at risk, and the diplomatic fallout could have ripple effects far beyond the auto sector. Restoring trust and forging new agreements will require both political will and creative solutions. Negotiations will be tough, with political pressure mounting and Trump using the crisis as a rallying cry. The debate over EV policy is now front and center in American politics, fueling partisan divides and public protests. Every decision is scrutinized, and the outcome could influence the next election. The outcome will shape the U.S. auto industry for years. Jobs, investments, and the future of American manufacturing all hang in the balance. Workers and executives alike are anxiously watching, knowing that the decisions made today will echo for decades. America's vulnerability is clear. Expect a push for domestic mining and processing, but that's a long-term fix. Building a reliable supply chain for critical minerals will take years, and in the meantime, the U.S. must navigate a rapidly changing global market. In the short term, U.S. automakers face higher costs and possible shortages while Europe surges ahead. Consumers may see fewer choices and higher prices, and some factories could slow production or even shut down temporarily. Europe's deal with Ontario cements its leadership in the EV market and sets a template for future partnerships. This alliance is already attracting new investments and accelerating innovation, putting additional pressure on North American competitors. The once unified North American auto bloc is fractured. A new transatlantic alliance is rising. As supply chains realign, the global balance of power in the auto industry is shifting before our eyes. The next months are critical. Can the U.S. recover, or will it fall behind? Industry leaders, policymakers, and workers are all racing against the clock to adapt and respond to these unprecedented challenges. The stakes, car prices, jobs, and global leadership in the green transition, could not be higher. The choices made now will affect millions of families and the planet's future. The world is watching as the race for the future of transportation enters a new phase. What happens next will set the tone for decades of innovation, competition, and cooperation on the road to a cleaner tomorrow.